Hello friends, this is Akulmach live and I am Chandrakant. Recently, G7 concluded their summit in London, and one of the major agenda on the table was climate change. Climate change has been such a chronic issue. The entire population of the world, 8 billion of us, are affected by the climate change, and not to talk about the billions of animals and other wildlife which are also affected by the climate change. What we can do to control situation around us as an enterprise and as an SME, as individual citizen of the world. To discuss this matter, we have a very interesting personality joining us in the studios. So friends, stick around to this very interesting discussion. I will catch you in a minute. Welcome back, friends. And as you know that the climate has become very important, and to discuss about what policies the corporates and enterprises must have in order to control climate in their own ecosystem, we have a very interesting personality. His name is Mike Bradley. He's joining us from UK. So without further ado, let me welcome Mike to our show.
Good afternoon, Chandra. How are you?
I'm good, Mike, and I always envy your background and the beaches and the environment friendly pictures that you have in your background. It's really nice.
It is a very pleasant area we've got here. I recommend when we have our tourism trades opening up again. This is the Goa of England.
Look forward, Mike. So I think the topic of our discussion is how do we handle the environment concerns, especially when it comes to enterprises and corporates. So we'd like to know from you, what are the things that enterprises must do in order to control the environment around their own ecosystem?
Yeah, well, I think this is very interesting. I was on a session yesterday morning where there was a professor of a university who had come up with a very complex model, as all professors do, because that's what they get paid on. They came up with an interesting, comprehensive, but very complicated model as to how companies can become or get towards net zero. And that got me thinking that actually, we must, with this subject, we have to start by not trying to boil the ocean. And it doesn't matter what organization you are or what you are as an individual. What you can't do is try and solve the global crisis yourself. The only thing you have control over is what your organization or your household can actually achieve. So if you are a householder and you leave all the lights on in your house, you're not helping the environment. So the first thing you could do in a household is you could walk through and have a best practice, which is when I leave the room, I'll switch the light off, for example. So within the corporate space, I think I think there's two aspects to this. But within the corporate space, what we have to do is the 80-20 rule. Okay, you can either try and drive for 100% net zero and spend the next 30 years trying to achieve it, or you could take the 80-20 rule, which says let's identify the 3 things we could change that would have the most positive impact on our environmental footprint. And I think if all organizations looked at that is far more impressive than having a 100-page policy around carbon change. It's far more effective because actually, if you focus on those 3 items, which maybe are, let's say, 80-20 rule, 80% of your carbon footprint is generated by these 3 items, you'll have a major positive impact on your carbon footprint. So I think it's find those three things within your organization that can actually make a difference. So it doesn't matter what size you are. Maybe like say, if it's an SME and they got a business, it's switching the lights off if that's a big thing. It's turning the power off when something's not in use. I don't know, recycling the plastic bottles properly. If it's a larger organization, maybe it's more efficient way of having your staff working. So, for example, if you are a white collar based business in the tech sector, do you honestly need to bring your staff into the office every day to do their job? And if the answer to that question is no, honestly, then maybe a remote working policy is the biggest single change you can make that would reduce your company footprint on the planet.
I think
those are my initial teaser thoughts for you, Chandra. What do you think?
Well, I think, Mike, these are very profound words that you've said. And I think every guru like yourself is saying that almost 50 to 60% of the workforce will actually get into contractual kind of workforce, and they will work from home or work from cafeteria or work from anywhere, but not from the office. And those kind of work will get outsourced. And I think you're talking about how do we control the environment around us. So I will tell you that the government of India has already banned few things for all individuals, and that may be very relevant to bring it here for information to be passed to global viewers here. Number one is that across India, it is not allowed. India does not allow citizens to build bore wells and draw water out from earth. So there are very few places where you can draw water out of earth. Otherwise, it is always a piped water. India is a large country with a lot of rain, but in spite of that, the water table has receded, and the government has taken a very stiff measure not to allow any bore wells across India. There may be few exceptions here and there, but by and large, almost 99% bore well does not work here, or does we don't depend on bore well. Number two is the electricity. So what is happening here is that 25% of the electricity is coming from the electric farms which are being installed right now. And this is a recent development where the goal of the government is not to depend on hydro or thermal, and gradually transition to solar. Why solar? Because there is so much sun here and it is all going waste, and a lot of open land where nobody lives. So those are the places where huge solar farms are being built, and consequently new businesses have also emerged. Tesla of Elon Musk has already shifted their giga factory to India, where they are going to do not only build the batteries for vehicles, but also do R&D so that the range of the vehicles can be increased. So a lot of R&D is being done in India, where the extender of the electric life in battery can be implemented globally. And number 3 point I like to make here is the goal for India to become all electric vehicle country by 2030 is the goal that has been set. So already there are many car manufacturers in India, because personal cars are one of the biggest contributor of pollution into the environment. So because of this, I already see a lot of two-wheelers going around with no sound, no noise pollution at all. Quietly they'll be going around, and I know at least 300 to 400 car manufacturers are already there and building their products, selling it online like any other merchandise. And I think the goal is that gradually all the large SUVs and all existing cars will be transitioned with the same body and chassis into electric cars. So I think that is a very aggressive goal that India has set up. These 3 things I wanted to bring in order to bring the environment, since we're talking about environment, these are the things.
Conversation, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting. You see, one of the other, and you already mentioned, Tesla is adopting this approach, but I think, again, large multinationals need to examine the top three. It's fine for Tesla to say they're going to produce this factory, but what is their carbon footprint in terms of bringing people into their office every day? Yeah. So there's two aspects to this. There's how you run your business and the business you do. There's two aspects to it. Also, there's massive opportunities coming out of the change, because where there's change, there's opportunities for new entrants, as you say, on the car position. I would suggest that also from the water perspective, I'm sure that there's now a big demand for different ways to generate water across the subcontinent. So that again gives, with the right support, that gives SMEs opportunities. The same with utilizing solar power. If you're going to use solar power, you need teams of local people who can support local businesses to help them adopt these things. So there is actually lots of opportunity for SMEs in that space. So again, there's two aspects. There is one, how you actually use the solar and the power yourself and the energy yourself, and there's also and the environment, and there's also how you can help drive that change. But I think there's another aspect to this, which is it's fine to ban something, okay, but the more effective way, and as I see it, in both the personal and the corporate space, the best way to incentivize people is through the tax system. Because whether it be not many governments at the moment can give discounts on tax. So it's probably better to say that governments should consider charging a premium to companies that don't adopt green policies. They don't adopt their top three. Maybe the largest multinationals or the quoted companies should have to identify these top three. And if they don't identify those top three items that they're going to change, that there's actually going to be a premium of corporation tax for the consumer themselves. Maybe this is around, there's a fair use policy on the amount of electricity you use. And if you've got X number of rooms and X number of people, that translates into a certain amount of energy across the board. And if you use more than that, maybe there's a premium charge. That way, I think people would think, oh, hold on a minute, maybe I should switch this light off when I go out the room. Maybe I should stop doing that. So I think there's the fiscal aspect, there's the personal responsibility aspect, and thirdly, there's the business opportunity aspect.
Well, Mike, there is one more thing I forgot to inform you, is about the solar cells. And the solar cells are quite expensive because they're made of rare earth elements, and most of it is coming from China world over. They are the masters of rare earth elements. So what has happened here is that it's heavily subsidized by Indian government. So if you have a plan, if you are an Indian citizen, and if you have a plan to completely rely on solar power, then it is 80% subsidized. You actually end up spending 2 million rupees to put a solar cell on the roof of your house, but it is 80% subsidized. So government is pushing a lot of citizens to go on the solar way and not depend on the grid.
And maybe there's another opportunity there then to actually find a technology which means that India can provide solar cells itself.
I think that is the opportunity, because the solar cells are quite expensive, and because they are made of rare earth elements, so maybe there is a new kind of solar cell that is required, which is low in cost, low in distribution, for the masses. So I think
Freely available, cheaper raw materials, easier to produce, more readily available, more consumer affordable. There's an opportunity. So maybe this is where Mr. Musk can employ some of his R&D money, is to look for cheaper ways, more efficient ways to produce batteries, to produce solar cells, etc. Of course, you have the benefit on solar compared to us. Well, we have to look more towards wind power, and possibly hydro. I don't know, but wind power for sure. And these technologies need to be more efficient as well. We need to be driving efficiency, as you say, on the battery side. Battery life is vitally important. Also, that is a great goal of moving to electricity by 2030. But there's got to be two things, in my view. One is there's got to be enough electricity. And we know that most national grids are already struggling to supply the electricity that's currently used. So somehow we've got to generate more in more efficient ways, faster and easier. Secondly, there's the utilization factor. Now, India is a lot larger country than the UK. But I know if I go from the south coast of the UK and I go up to the northeast of the UK in a purely electric car, it won't get there in the 5 hours it takes me now, because it's going to run out of juice. So it's not actually practical. And I would suggest that in India it's even less practical, because you've got vast distances between different cities and places. Obviously, there's aircraft, that maybe it'd be cheaper to fly in terms of environmental impact. It probably is, in fact. Probably cheaper to the environment to fly people, and particularly if that plane was solar cell powered. So there's lots of potential for change. There needs to be, in my view, a lot more investment and support. But the answer isn't purely just to say, well, we're going to hand out taxpayers' dollars to people who do this, because it isn't necessarily practical yet. We need to get the whole supply chain and R&D and product life correct before we can say across the board we're going to do this. However, I'm not saying we should say, oh, well, we can't do it now, therefore we shouldn't do anything. What I'm actually saying is, let's start with the big things in your life that you can change. Be your corporate life, be your household life. What are the big things you can make a change on? Because if we all sought ways to improve the 80% of generous energy we use today, or environmental damage we cause today, chances are we can make a fairly major dent in the damage that we create.
Well, I think there are very few countries or the cultures. I would not call India as a country. I think there are multiple cultures that exist here. And similarly, a country like Switzerland, and there are maybe one or two more countries which are masters in recycling. So the culture here in India, at least I can talk about, and I have actually been to Switzerland many times. They are even better than Indians in terms of recycling. So the Indian population actually recycles everything. Everything is recycled into something, and very little actually goes to waste as a waste or as a harmful material which causes environmental changes. We are animal loving country. We are about 70-80% are vegetarians. So the animals also thrive along with us. So I think that is why the current form of environmental conservation, which has been promoted by G7, and recently they finished their summit in UK, where India has not really agreed to the G7 proposed climate change policy, simply because the way they have drafted it is not friendly for the Asian people, in China, Chinese included, because I think India, even though India and China are the largest population, but they don't, talking about Chinese, I think they eat a lot of animals of different types and kinds, but at least Indians, they don't harm the environment as much as American would do, and our waste and the usage of water also is very, very lower than the average American. Simply because India has almost like 20% of the world population living in this country, but have only 2% or probably less than 2% fresh water. So you can imagine the scarcity of water here. So already as part of our culture, we actually conserve water.
I think that's right. And I think there is a danger in prescribing the way that the net zero policies are administered. We talked about households, we talked about companies looking at the top 3 things. What 3 things can they change to have the most positive impact? The same is true of countries. Right, and maybe the objective should be, look, what we want to do is reduce our impact, and we can all sign up to that, or should all sign up to that. What we shouldn't do in these multinational, multilateral agreements is say, well, the way we're going to do it is X. Because the top 3 priorities in America won't be the same top priorities as we have in the UK, won't be the same top priorities as you have in India. But the overall goal is to reduce environmental impact. So let's look at, even on a countrywide level, what are the 3 major changes we can make to have the most positive impact on the environment? And let's make those short-term goals, not 2030, not 2050, but actually let's say we have got these top 3 items. Within 5 years, we're going to reduce this.
Well, Mike, I think the environment policy is not the mandatory clause right now for any contract. For example, if you look at the new things which have been added in across the world in all contracts, is the POSCO policy, which is any cruelty towards the youngsters, small children below 18 years. So that policy and that clause is the mandatory clause. And also sexual abuse at the workplace is also a mandatory clause. So I think what you're saying is that in any contract for any corporate or any SME or even startup, I think the environment clause must be made mandatory for all agreements. I think that is where we can start.
I think that's a good idea. I think, again, it needs to be kept simple. The problem is, as soon as you complicate it, particularly the SMEs are going to struggle because it's more red tape, and and if we're not careful, it's another reason that SMEs won't get their fair share of major contracts, because a large organization can have half a dozen lawyers, 3 teams of people spread across the country working on their policy, their climate change policy, and whereas an SME maybe is a team of 5 or 10 people, if that, will then have, oh my goodness, I can't compete in this contract. I've got a great innovation. I can supply this across the globe. However, because I can't tick this box, because I don't have 30 people sitting in the side getting paid lots of money, I can't actually tick that box. So that's where, for me, it would be a better solution to say, you as a company identify these top 3 priorities. You say in your policy to tick that box what those top 3 are, what your current consumption is, what your targeted consumption is, and what you are doing to change it. 3 things. You can fit it on 1 page. It doesn't need, a management consultancy to come up with a 100-page document that has to be updated every week. That will not work. It's not practical and it's not going to have a big impact, because the largest companies that can do it will actually still find ways to go around it. And probably they won't achieve, well, maybe they will achieve it by 2050. But if they start with their top 3 and aim to achieve it in 5 years' time, and everybody did that, then there'll be real change, and fast.
Well, Mike, we learned many things today in our discussion. I think it's a very vast subject. Many things we did not cover because simply in a few minutes we cannot cover things like water conservation, e-waste. There are other issues. So I think you are making a lot of sense when you say that identify 3 things and incorporate that in your environment policy. And as long as out of a laundry list of 20 items, if you have complied to 3, you are good to go. So I think it's a very good suggestion, and people who are listening to this, can start contributing, enterprises and SMEs, to see how we can help the environment globally.
Yep, absolutely. Sounds like a very good idea. I wish I'd come up with that. I did, actually.
You are the person behind the inspiration. So whether you say it explicitly or you just inspire, it's one and the same thing.
Thank you, Chandra. No, that's true. I do think there's a way to do it. Maybe there's a version of the executives eco chair that we should be discussing, how to tease out what those top 3 are.
Absolutely, Mike. It was lovely talking to you, and we will catch up next week again on some.
Look forward.
Sure, Mike. Catch you next time.
Look forward to it, Chandra. And I think I've already got a subject in mind that I think would be quite interesting.
Sure, Mike. Catch you next week, same time, same day.
Look forward to it. Take care, Chandra. Have a good rest of the day.